Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Director. I would love to say that this is going to be pleasant, but unfortunately it's not. I've had 3 rather nasty experiences with the EPA in recent memory. One is the city of Lawrenceville, where you guys were apparently receiving forms from an unlicensed individual for 6 years without anyone realizing that he wasn't licensed, because apparently no one bothered to check. The forms at one point in time contained references for multiple years to individuals who were no longer there, and you guys knew that, and nobody checked. And at the end of the day, the water treatment plant gets shut down. I'm sorry, the sewer treatment plant gets shut down. The town is thrown into chaos, and quite frankly, most likely all of this could have been avoided years ago had EPA done what it was supposed to do. Now, contrast that with the village of Atwood, who had an issue. They attempted to work with you guys, and despite doing everything asked, including spending a lot of money that a little tiny town of less than 2,000 people doesn't have to spend on engineering reports, gets a massive fine from the state of Illinois. And we try to work with you guys on this, and the bill gets killed over here because it's more important to penalize people and charge people who are trying to do the right thing money and fines than it is to get them to actually use the money to fix the problem. So in the village of Atwood's case, they were taking all commercially reasonable and diligent activity to remediate and redress the problem that they agreed with you they had, and yet they get penalized. Well, the taxpayers get penalized at the end of the day, paying fines that they don't have. I am beyond myself. I forgot. Last summer, and I will say to your assistant, who was helpful once she got involved in it, we had the entire city of Mattoon, Illinois, which is 35,000 people with no drinking water, and we got a never-ending change every day. Oh, you do this, you're clear. They do it. Oh, it changed. Sorry, tomorrow you got to do this to get clear now. And then that changed, and the next day you got to do this to get cleared. And so basically, the city of Mattoon went almost a week on the hottest week of the summer with no drinking water, and quite frankly, with huge thanks to the city staff, Rural King, that donated tens of thousands of bottles of water, people who are driving water in from other locations. And I know you're not IEMA, but we actually had water trucks sitting right there in Mattoon at the armory from the National Guard that no one could use to go get the water. But in that instance, the ball kept moving on what it was that the city of Mattoon had to do to comply, to reopen and get their water. I will say in that instance, I think the person sitting to your left, who ultimately intervened and got us a little bit of clarity, I hesitate, I do not, I can't imagine how much longer it would have gone on had she not intervened. This is nuts. On one hand, we're penalizing people who are trying to do the right thing. On the other hand, we're nowhere to be found. On the other hand, we don't know what we're doing when we show up. Explain to me why you deserve any amount of an appropriation.
So taking those in reverse order, just because given some of the chronology, I share your frustration with respect to what happened in Mattoon. Laura and I were in constant discussions about both what had led to that outcome and then the necessary postmortem to prevent it from happening again. I fully recognize that that does not mitigate any of your justifiable frustration. If we were sitting in the alternative seats, I would probably have been much more profane than you were, and so I do appreciate that. Because drinking water is one among the environmental protections that is contemplated by the constitutional right every Illinois resident has to a safe and healthy environment. And the lack of certainty behind that, as evidenced by some of the frustrations that we ran into in Mattoon, is not acceptable. And I agree with your assessment there.
One thing, it's Mattoon. It's a big
Sorry.
deal. It's a big
Sorry.
deal.
Mattoon, and apologies. Growing up in Kentucky, I know the pronunciation of individual cities is very imperative. On Appleton, I want to get some additional information because I share the broader objective of seeking compliance and seeking technical assistance over fines. There are areas in which, particularly within our water programs, that is a matter of our partnership with the federal government that we are compelled to pursue enforcement. Ideally, we are designing our programs to be working to the left of that. Our Bureau of Water has recently launched a capacity development group, which was targeted to do, among other things, ready communities to be able to apply for the necessary infrastructure loans, as well as to address on-site technical assistance. And so that broader thesis informs, I know, my and our staff's collective desire to not have to ultimately refer things to the Attorney General's office. Because you're absolutely correct. The funding that ultimately would have been used to pay that fine necessarily depletes funding that would be otherwise available for the necessary water infrastructure upgrades. And so that's something that is a broader compliance initiative we are seeking to develop. That being said, I do want to be able to get back to you in a responsive manner on the specific instances there to be able to step through why we made the collective decision we did, and also how it would look different going forward.
Well, on Atwood, I can tell you what it is. You guys have a policy that says if the corrective action isn't implemented within X days, you're fined. Well, the problem is in the case of Atwood, as is quite often, and I would actually ask the members of the committee to kind of pay attention to this because it's important, it's not possible. A lot of the times the corrective action that you are asking people to take just can't, it's not like flipping a switch. Engineering alone in this case exceeded the time frame in which you had to have this implemented. You guys knew that when you ordered it. You knew it was impossible for them to comply. As the chairman and I, who are attorneys, know, most of the time in commercial real estate, when someone is taking diligent effort, making diligent efforts, diligent pursuit, there's all kinds of magic words like commercially reasonable efforts. There's one, commercially reasonable efforts. To remediate or take care of or eliminate the problem, you work with people. And in the case in hand with Atwood, everybody knew, you guys knew, there was no way, literally, legal impossibility, no way for them to comply without getting fined, despite all efforts to comply. And it's not their fault, but the engineering takes time. And it simply didn't have enough time to do it, which makes me think we're more worried about finding people than we are about solving problems. Now let's get to solving problems, because Lawrenceville has got a real problem. In 6 years of reports being submitted, and I'm not going to say definitively false reports, but reports that certainly weren't accurate, and nobody catches that in 6 years?
So, and I do want to be able to follow up on the issue with Atwood, because there is a world in which the specific revenue that we were seeking may be a part of a menu that US EPA dictates to us. And if that's the case, I think that warrants a broader conversation between us and our federal partners about ensuring there's an element of reasonableness within that process. If it's state specific, I can commit to you that we will be addressing that within our own authority.
Thank you, because reasonableness is all anybody ever asked for, and there was none given. Go ahead.
Yeah, totally understand. And so for Lawrenceville, I know that our staff have been aggressively working to both address the ongoing issues there, as well as to source what ultimately led to this. You know, Laura has been running point on this, and so I will defer to her for further discussion.
Right, so Senator, I know you've met with our staff recently. Representative Niemerg has been involved as well. We've made a number of visits out to the site. I think you also know, with respect to the operator, there's also a process going on at this time at which the director will ultimately adjudicate that as well.
I'm aware of that. I think this one needs a serious review, because quite frankly, this could be any town in any part of Illinois. If no one's looking at the paper that's filed, then any town, I mean, just for you all know, the wastewater treatment system essentially blew up in Lawrenceville, Illinois. And then Johnny come lately on the spot, shuts it down, yanks the guy's license. when apparently the reports being filed were inaccurate for over 6 years. And by inaccurate, I mean, in some cases, not even filed by a guy that had a license for 6 years. Okay. Now, I do have one last question. We have I find this amazing by Illinois standards. Well, no, I guess by Illinois standards, it's just run of the mill. We have a electric vehicle coordinator who makes as much as you do, Director.
So we do. And
The person makes $207,600 a year. They're the highest paid employee in your agency, equal only to you. Why are we paying someone $207,600 a year to be an electric vehicle coordinator?
so I think it helps to go into some of both the individual employee's background as well as the portfolio. So this is the second gubernatorially appointed position within the agency. Her portfolio includes not only maintaining the hundreds of millions of dollars of electric transportation funding that we coordinate, but she also oversees the EV work of every other agency that has such a program within the executive branch. In addition, she's also the only other employee who engages directly with the governor on his EV agenda. And so while I understand especially the comparison, this is an individual who is nationally and internationally recognized as an expert in her field and came to Illinois for the specific purpose of undertaking this portfolio. And as a result of her work, we have seen dramatic increases of the electric transportation infrastructure statewide, as well as EV adoption.
Was it because of her work, or was that because of the billions of dollars in incentives that were given out for people to buy EVs?
I would say both. Part of the incentives were driven, and some of the federal funding we received were a direct result of her diligent effort.
Now, let me ask you this. But that's federal fund. I'm talking about the state EV credit for the state taxes.
So I would say they're hand in hand. Without some of her expertise, I think that the capacity to be able to effectively deploy those funds would be very limited.
And how many EVs does Illinois have on the road today?
Approximately 165,000.
165,000. And your goal is 1 million by 2030.
Correct.
And your 165,000 since this employee came in has gone up how much? Where did it start at? What was the base?
So I don't have the initial base, but I know year over year it's about 25% a year.
25%. So you added 40,000 vehicles when people are getting a tens of thousands of dollar tax credit to purchase a vehicle. Yet out of 13 million people in Illinois, you only added 40,000 vehicles?
I would have to check the math, but that running.
Well, I mean, 25%. I mean, if you're at 160 now,
yeah.
You started at 120-ish, right? 130, somewhere in there. So you added 30, 40 a year. Yet despite all these incentives and the highest paid person in the agency coordinating it, no one's buying.
So I do want to push back a little on the no one's buying it. And as I noted earlier, there are a variety of factors that inform vehicle purchase decisions. At this point, the market is starting to lean back toward EV purchasing. As Laura said earlier, the 1 million vehicles a year is a goal. It's a goal that we still aspire to, and we're trying to deploy those funds as effectively as possible to be able to achieve that.
Okay. 2 last questions. I've never heard this phrase, direct gubernatorial appointment, before. How does that work? Is that in HR?
So it's a position subject to Senate confirmation. I should have been more precise in how I characterize that.
Okay. So it's appointed by the governor and then confirmed by the Senate. Okay.
Correct.
Now, if you're the Bureau of Water manager who's maybe incensed that they haven't had a pay raise to the tune of $207,600, and how does the staff feel about that? And how excited are they to go do what they're supposed to do on a daily basis when someone gets inserted over them in a single year making probably twice what they're making?
So generally speaking, I think that the work that our staff does is directly that is motivated by their individual professional desires. One of the legacies of state government, for better or worse, has always been that there are different tiers of pay across the board. When I came to the agency in 2013, the highest paid employee was a permit engineer, so paid higher than the director. And so one of the realities of public service is that there's always going to be a situation where somebody may make more than you. I know engaging directly with our staff, they've been incredibly appreciative of the fact that Governor Pritzker and his team have continued to make sure that our staff and then staff at other agencies have their salaries keep pace with both the collective bargaining staff as well as to accelerate payment to reflect what they would maybe be able to see externally. And for that,
What's your intro level pay for water? Water. What's the entry level pay for a water manager, whatever the title is?
so the entry level position for a water engineer or project manager is a life science career trainee. I don't have that specific number in front of me, but could absolutely get it back to you. That's a figure, though, that's set by the collective
Just
bargaining.
ballpark it. 80, 85?
I think it'd be maybe a little lower than that, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you accurate information.
Let's just say 80 for the sake of argument. So that the guy making 80 grand who's in charge of reviewing things like water quality reports from water treatment plants, you think they're super excited about somebody walking in over them making $207,600 a year?
So in an agency of 800 employees, I think that it would be fair to assume some people would be frustrated by that. Ultimately, though, it's my job as well as the job of our team to be able to motivate around those difficulties. And one of the luxuries that we have in having a leadership team that are very experienced in state government is that this is a dynamic that we've had to manage in a lot of other ways before. And so we're just having to reapply some of those tools that we learned when, say, bargaining unit staff were making more than their bosses to a situation like this. But I would reiterate that I know our team really appreciate the efforts of CMS and the governor's office to help right-size those positions, because we are today in a very different salary dynamic and with tiered approaches than we would have been, say, 10 or 12 years ago.
Okay, I think I made my point.